Why do people expand and contract their realities to validate their problems? Human beings don't deliberately create problems for themselves. Well, usually not consciously, at least. What they do instead is attempt to make sense of their experiences as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And the mind is constantly organising reality so it can predict what will happen next. Also to conserve energy and maintain a sense of certainty and control. To do this in nanoseconds relies heavily on automated shortcuts. Two of the most powerful shortcuts the mind uses to do this are expansions and contractions. Expansion allows a person to take one experience and apply it broadly, making it applicable to all experiences, so they can avoid repeating the same problems, the same mistakes, the same pain. Contraction is when all things become just one thing. This allows a person to reduce complex situations to simple conclusions, so they can act decisively without having to analyse every single minute detail. Now, both processes are intelligent, highly adaptive, and, for the most part, necessary for survival. The difficulty arises when these natural processes become habitualized, automatic, and usually massively exaggerated to help validate a feeling. Once unconsciously created and accepted, it can thereafter run without being questioned or re-examined. When expansion becomes excessive, a single event can be stretched across space, time, energy, matter, identity, and meaning, until it appears universal. One rejection becomes everyone rejects me. One mistake becomes I always fail. One uncomfortable feeling becomes it's all unbearable. In these moments, the mind's not lying to you. It's merely generalizing in an attempt to validate and future-proof. It's sort of creating its own built-in perception protection system. It assumes that if it treats something as global and permanent, it will be fully prepared the next time. When contraction becomes excessive, the opposite occurs. A rich and complex reality is reduced to a very narrow and limiting definition. A person is no longer someone who had a difficult experience. They become a failure. A situation is no longer challenging. It becomes impossible. And the temporary state becomes just who I am. In both cases, perception loses flexibility. And it's behavioral flexibility that gives us options and keeps our experiences healthy and appropriately expansive. From a quantum linguistics perspective, problems are not maintained by events themselves, but by the way language gives a meaning that locks those events into rigid perceptual coordinates. The moment experienced gets linguistically fixed as being everywhere, always, in every way, for everyone, and for everything. And the nervous system treats it as a permanent reality rather than a temporary interpretation. What began as a useful shortcut becomes a self-reinforcing negative loop. The individual is then at risk of living permanently inside a structure of meaning that feels objective, even though it was constructed through language patterns that they were never even consciously aware of using at the time. This is why understanding inductive and deductive language is so powerful. I've written about this extensively in one of the chapters of my book, Advanced Linguistic Influencing, which you can get on Amazon. I'll put the link in the description below this video. Once you can hear how someone is expanding or contracting their reality, you can begin to loosen the structure that's holding the problem in place. Not by arguing with their experience of it, but by gently shifting the way it's organized. Once you can hear how someone is expanding or contracting their reality, you can begin to loosen the structure that's holding the problem in place. Not by arguing with their experience of it, but by gently shifting the way it's organized. Because when the organisation changes, the experience can change as well. And when the experience changes, the problem often no longer needs to exist in the way that it once did. So let's look at expanding and contracting perception through space, time, energy and matter. Making one thing everything is an inductive pattern, and turning everything into one thing is a deductive pattern. People naturally move between these two thinking styles, often without realizing it at all. The direction they move in usually depends on which pattern best intensifies and maintains their problem most effectively. Inductive thinking expands experience outwards, and deductive thinking contracts experience inwards. Neither is inherently wrong. Both are necessary for human cognition. The problem arises when one becomes rigid, automatic, and logically unquestioned. When a person is emotionally triggered and distressed, they often unknowingly use inductive language to inflate single experience into a universal truth. The intensity of the emotion triggered requires them to make it bigger than Texas, so as to validate and justify the emotion that they're undeniably feeling. A moment becomes a lifetime, and an event becomes an identity, and difficulty can become destiny. At other times, they can do the opposite. They can collapse a complex reality into a single defining point. A whole relationship becomes a mistake. A full career becomes a failure. A rich personality becomes just anxious. Your role as a master of influence is to notice where the language is expanding or contracting their internal reality, and then intentionally test and guide them to acknowledge the opposite movement, to restore flexibility and open up choices for them. Because it's behavioural flexibility that creates options, which dissolves problems. And you're helping them to do this by shining a light that shows their problem up to be an illusion. And if you find value in this kind of content, all about advanced language skills, then do like and subscribe, because there's plenty more in the schedule to come. Here are some inductive expansion patterns. Inductive language stretches perception across space, time, energy and matter, until something specific appears global, permanent, or absolute. The common linguistic markers for this include words like everything, nothing, everyone, no one, everywhere, nowhere, always, never, in every way, and in no way. These are known as universal quantifiers, and they're powerful because they erase exceptions. Once the exceptions disappear, the possibility disappears with them. When someone says something like, everything goes wrong for me, or everybody ignores me, I always mess things up, this happens for me all the time, I simply can't go anywhere. They're no longer describing experience, they're declaring a very limiting constructed reality. The nervous system has no choice but to respond to these linguistic expansions as if they were indeed facts. Now here are some deductive contraction patterns. Deductive language does the reverse. It compresses wide experience into a very narrow or even singular definition. Linguistic markers for this include just, only, this or that, here or there, me or them, one thing, that's it, it's simply. For example, you might hear people say things like, this is just how I am. It was the one thing I wanted. It's only a small issue. You had to go and bring that up. Compression can sometimes reduce distress, but when misused, it can also trap someone by stripping complexity and nuance from their perception. Contraction can become very limiting, when it reduces options and reduces possibilities. This is where a very important therapeutic principle of linguistic counterbalance comes in. When you hear a person expanding too far, you can taste for the possibility of gently contracting. When they contract too tightly, linguistically, you can taste for acceptance of a gentle expansion. You're certainly not trying to contradict them. You're simply attempting to alter the perceptual coordinates of the language. If they do react as if you're contradicting them, then you've simply taken too big a first step. This is where space, time, energy, and matter become practical tools rather than abstract ideas. You can expand or contract any of these dimensions using carefully chosen language. For example, expanding and contracting space. If someone localizes a problem as being everywhere, or even right here, you can change the associated meaning by simply contracting or expanding the location. What it means when it's only here will more than likely be different if it were somewhere else. The key is to test either by expanding or contracting their spatial awareness. Do you mean everywhere or just in certain places? If it's everywhere, where was the last location? How far does it have to be away for it to still feel close? Spatial expansion can easily introduce the concept of distance, and distance tends to reduce intensity. Spatial contraction can reduce the sense of overwhelm and open up manageable options for resolution. We can also expand and contract time. If someone globalizes their experience across time with the classic, "this always happens to me," you can contract time and test if they're willing to acknowledge that it may actually only happen some of the time. Is it always, or do you mean just recently? Is it truly forever or only up until now? Is it every time, all the time, or only occasionally, most of the time? It's very difficult, if not impossible, for something to happen in the same way, at the same time, all of the time. Temporal contraction reintroduces the possibility of it being different at some point in time, maybe even now. Then we can look at modulating energy. This is where a person's experience is being labelled as overwhelming, terrible, awful, or perhaps painful. You'll hear people express the energetic part of the experience using adjective and adverb modifiers from presuppositions. They'll say things like, "This is unbearable. I'm only feeling sad because they hate me. I can't cope with the relentless intensity of it." This is where we can change the quality of the energetic intensity, making the good stuff bigger and the bad stuff smaller. Is it truly unbearable or just very strong? Might they feel other things in the same way that you can? In what moment does the intensity feel least relentless? When we can stimulate the person's thinking in a way that creates an undeniable energetic shift, then the change in their emotional physiology will be immediate. Thinking you feel different makes the body respond in kind. Finally, we can expand and contract matter. If a person defines themselves or a certain specific thing as the problem, you'll no doubt hear them say things like, "I'm a failure," or "this is rubbish." Notice it's hard to do without using energy to help define the problem's meaning. This is a specific thing that now only has the quality of being rubbish. You can test its reality by attempting to expand or contract the matter they're associating with the reality of the problem. All of you in all contexts, or only part of you in some contexts? Are you completely like that, or only in one area? Is it always this, or can it sometimes be that? When the identified matter, be it themselves or something in their reality, is allowed to expand or contract, whichever is the most appropriate, then the set-in-stone definition can soften or start to bring counterexamples into their awareness. Here are some linguistic sets that take us from inductive to deductive and back to inductive. These word scales allow you to consciously guide and hopefully change another person's perception. We're looking to introduce an awareness of other options and contradictions. For space, we have everywhere, anywhere, somewhere, here, nowhere. For time, we have all the time, anytime, sometimes, now, and never. For energy, we've got in every way, in any way, in some way, this way, and in no way. And for matter, we have everything, anything, something, this thing, and nothing. Very importantly, we also have identity, which is also matter. That's everyone, anyone, someone, me, you, or them, no one. Each step along the scale changes how reality is organized internally. Moving someone from one word along this continuum can radically alter what their experience means and how it feels. This helps us create a productive doubt and therapeutic confusion. Doubt, when used skillfully, is not so much destabilizing as potentially liberating. When a person is certain their problem is absolute, their linguistically engineered certainty creates a structure that, if allowed to continue, will do a very good job of holding the problem in place. By gently introducing and gaining acceptance of linguistic variations, you allow their mind to question their own rigid conclusions. Now, this cannot be done aggressively or confrontationally, as that would risk them digging in and opposing. The stepping stones that you're looking to introduce into their perception must fit well with where they're willing to go. Too big a step, and they'll not be willing to come on the journey with you. It must be plausible for them in their model of the world, and they must be curious enough to at least consider it. Subtle confusion introduces doubt that will create a momentary change that's just enough to interrupt their automatic thinking patterns. And when automatic patterns pause, new possibilities can be introduced. You're not really looking to confuse the person, but you are looking to effectively confuse the structural components of their problem. And when the structure is destabilized enough, the problem will lose critical elements that gave it its perceived reality. So here's the inductive-deductive quantum linguistic principle. Inductive language patterns have the power to expand reality. Deductive language patterns have the power to contract reality. And all flexible language has the power to reshape reality. The goal is never to trap someone in expansion or contraction. The goal is to give them the ability to move freely between both, because freedom of movement within perception equals freedom of experience within life. In our next video, we're going to be de-identifying so that we can re-identify. So do like and subscribe as we continue to learn, evolve, and create positive change together.